this. And he's like, no, honey, you're perfect just the way you are. I can't do Boy George, but, I was like, no, I feel that something is wrong in there. And everybody around the table just left, like thinking like, oh, this is self-hating homosexual. Well, I wasn't hating myself. I was hating the things that I was doing because I knew they were hurting me.
For years, society has pushed the slogan that everyone with same-sex attraction is simply born that way, and anyone who dares to question that narrative is immediately pushed out of the public conversation. But Milo, who was a major conservative figure about a decade ago and who himself experiences same-sex attraction, has openly challenged that assumption. In the first clip, he talks candidly about how factors like an overbearing mother, an absent father, and certain early relational dynamics can contribute to the development of same-sex attraction in this interview with Tucker Carlson. Let's listen.
Among Black and Jewish Americans, they report statistically significantly higher rates of homosexuality. Well, why could that be? Overbearing moms and absent dads. Or in the Jewish case, nebbish fathers and, nebbish, scholarly, bookish dad and a larger-than-life mom who, one day decides she's going to be a rabbi. But no, you're like that because you got raped by a priest. Or you're like that because your mom was overbearing and your dad wasn't around. Or you're like that because you failed to form a platonic, stable attachments to other men as a child. For some reason, maybe you didn't have a good male role model or whatever. But there is a relatively small number of identifiable and repeated etiologies that mark somebody out as being, vulnerable to this.
Transitioning from his personal experience to broader evidence, Milo's point isn't just a random hunch. There are actually a handful of studies over the last several decades that mirror the patterns he describes. For instance, a 2004 study of Catholic seminarians reported that men who identified as homosexual had significantly lower levels of intimacy, connection, and positive engagement with their fathers compared to their heterosexual counterparts. Likewise, a 1983 psychological study suggested that boys who grew up with emotionally distant or disengaged fathers, especially in combination with an overbearing mother, sometimes showed patterns of identity confusion that the researchers speculated might play a role in the development of same-sex attraction for a subset of individuals. Now, moving on to the next clip, Milo shifts to an even more provocative topic: why he believes gay sex is ultimately sterile and unsatisfying. Let's listen.
Yes, there's something about their sexual activity they know isn't right. And it's not just in the technical sense that the sex is sterile and therefore can never be part of the holy sacrament of marriage because it can't be co-procreation with God, right?
Yes.
Co-procreation with God meaning, you make a physical body with your wife, but then God puts a soul in.
Right.
And that's why it's the most precious sacrament because, you do the others, you do your confirmation, all the rest of it, but it's leading up to you getting to make something with God, right? Which is the real reason that Lucifer's so mad and because the angels can't do that, right? The angels don't get to participate in creation with our Lord, but every single human being does. Everything working, performing the function for which it was designed, like doing that for which it was intended, you start to realize why gay sex is not hitting, And this is the basis, this is the start, this is where the therapy begins.
Milo is actually spot on here because what he's describing lines up perfectly with what the Catholic Church has always taught about the nature and purpose of sex. According to Catholic moral theology, sex has two inseparable ends: the spousal union of husband and wife and the procreation of new life. So when either of these dimensions is removed, the act becomes detached from the purpose God designed it for. And this is precisely why, from a Catholic standpoint, gay sexual relationships cannot be genuinely fulfilling. They lack not only the male-female complementarity necessary for authentic bodily union, but also the inherent openness to life that gives sexual intimacy its creative, life-giving meaning. Without these, the act becomes not only biologically sterile, but also emotionally flat and spiritually unfulfilling, no matter how sincerely people may seek connection through it. Building on this, the next clip examines another dimension of Milo's argument: why those with same-sex attraction are sometimes drawn toward roles of influence and power, particularly within the Catholic hierarchy. Let's listen.
The most frightening thing about magic is its ability to compel the wills of others.
Yes.
Right? And that's what I think homosexuals are seeking because they feel so powerless in their own lives and have this understanding that they are broken people without agency over their own sex lives, over their bodies, over that down there. Like, I don't even have control over me, but I'm damn well going to have control over you. Because I can see that might be something that attracts homosexuals to the Catholic Church, for instance. Just the illusion of being a bishop. I mean,
or National Review magazine.
Well,
which,
seeing themselves as powerless even to control their own bodies, and knowing on some level, I think homosexuals seek out those places. You see,
I think what Milo is saying here is actually very deep and psychologically insightful. Whenever someone feels powerless or wounded in a particular area of life, there is a well-known psychological phenomenon called compensatory striving, where people try to reclaim a sense of control by seeking influence, recognition, or authority in other areas. For example, if you have been made to feel small in one part of your life, you naturally look for places where you can feel large. And maybe that's exactly what we are seeing in society today. It's not accidental that so many modern power structures like politics, entertainment, academia, and yes, even parts of the church hierarchy have a noticeable presence of people who openly identify as homosexual. Now, moving on, Milo then shifts the discussion toward cultural influence, examining how certain influential gay men in media and fashion have shaped the way women are portrayed, often in hypersexualized, exaggerated, and distorted ways. Let's listen.
She hates herself. She's fat. She's crazy. She's every gay man's dream. She can't dress. She's.
Why is that every gay man's dream?
Because they want to visit upon their female friends the cruelty they wish that they could perform on their mothers.
Whoa.
They want to make her feel fat and ugly and ridiculous because that's what their mother did to them, and there was no dad around to protect them, and their mother was just this overbearing, terrible, sort of the Jungian devouring mother. Imagine like a female like Lutheran pastor or a female Jewish rabbi, and they're this like, hey, it's great to grieve. Like, that's for a TV show, but like one of those, right? There's this horrible, overbearing monstrousness that on some level the homosexual knows is what's made him like this. Because dad wasn't around, so mom did it. By the way,
it's actually true that large parts of the fashion industry portray women in ways that are exaggerated, distorted, and often downright bizarre, with a few exceptions, of course. The industry has an unusually high concentration of gay men in creative leadership roles, and whether people want to admit it or not, that shapes the aesthetic. As Milo puts it, some of these designers project their own unresolved conflicts, especially around their relationships with their mothers, onto the fashion they create. Instead of celebrating authentic femininity, they sometimes amplify it to something grotesque, hypersexualized, or surreal. The result is clothing that feels less like an expression of beauty and more like an attempt to work out personal demons on the female body. And then, of course, these outfits are paraded on runways as if they represent womanhood, when in reality they are often reflections of male psychological struggle rather than female identity. Moving to the next clip, Milo talks about why many single mothers are so quick to affirm the gay or trans identities of their children. Let's listen.
This is why trans was so popular, because it got parents off the hook. If you've got a gay kid, you did something. But if your kid has a disease and was born into the wrong body, well, that's not your fault, is it? And you get all this sympathy and, all your friends are like, you got a trans kid. How tough for you? No, you got a faggot because you raised a faggot because you're a terrible parent. That's what's really going on. They want to avoid that. So instead, no, I'm going to chop its ding-dong off and say it's got a disease. Like, that's why it was so popular with single moms.
Amazing.
That's why.
This leads naturally into the question of cultural affirmation. I've often wondered why so many women, especially single mothers, so quickly go along with the cultural trend of affirming their children when they identify as gay or trans. And what Milo says actually sheds a lot of light on this. For many mothers, there is a deep instinct to shield themselves from the painful thought that they may have failed in some part of parenting. And if they were to admit that their own unhealthy patterns or mistakes may have contributed to their child's confusion, then they would have to take responsibility for it. So instead, they embrace the culture's propaganda uncritically because it provides an easy escape. This is just how they are, nothing to do with me. That narrative removes the need for responsibility, self-reflection, and accountability. And when you look at it through that lens, Milo's point becomes surprisingly understandable. Finally, in the last clip, Milo discusses why our culture is aggressively promoting and affirming homosexuality at every turn. Let's listen.
To confront the horror that a gay person might be able to ungay means that whatever you've got going in your life, you could fix easy. But you don't want to, do you? You don't want to get better. You don't want to stop. Because if he can stop having sex with men, knowing what a powerful compulsion urge that is for most men, that might mean I have to stop drinking. That might mean I have to stop taking drugs. That might mean I have to stop being a fat ass. That might mean I have to stop being cruel, being vindictive, abusive, malicious. And I think that part of it is certainly that we have become a society that encourages vice over virtue, that aggressively pushes sin.
Yes.
Why? Because dumb, dependent people are easier to control, because dumb, dependent people living paycheck.
I personally agree with Milo on this point. When you see someone come out of a serious pattern of sin and genuinely turn their life around, it forces you to confront your own life. Their conversion becomes a mirror. It exposes where you need to repent, where you need to grow, where you are still holding on to comfortable sins. And let's be honest, most people don't want that kind of challenge. They don't want to be pushed toward holiness. So instead, they surround themselves with voices and lifestyles that make them feel better about staying exactly as they are. And maybe that's what Milo is pointing to, that part of the cultural push to affirm everything uncritically, including sexual identities, rooted in a deeper desire to avoid personal conversion. As long as society keeps celebrating behaviors that take us further from God, people can quiet their conscience and avoid the uncomfortable work of transformation. I hope this video is helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. God bless you.